All right, we're live. YouTube, what's up? My name is Matt. I go by Professor O on Twitter. I am a Dallas Cowboys fan, and I made a brand new channel over the weekend. So if you're watching this, you can be a day one subscriber. You can be the first one on the channel. What we're going to talk about throughout the history or the lifetime of my channel, we're going to go over draft breakdowns. We're going to analyze some film. We're going to do just general sports talk in general. Today, we are starting out the channel with Ryan Gunn. He is a huge Vikings fan. He can tell from the background. And we're going to do a mock draft. We're going to do Cowboys and Vikings. It'll be kind of cool because we have 10 and 14 in the mock. So we're going to be able to pick kind of side by side throughout this. We're going to do just 5 rounds, and we're using PFF. Ryan, go ahead and tell us. You're a Vikings fan. Did you guys have any big signings this offseason? Do you have a big draft need that you want to address? Take the floor.
First of all, I feel like I should be your first subscriber since I'm your first guest. So
I appreciate that.
I'll make sure I do that as soon as we finish this.
Cool.
Yeah, so Vikings free agency, a couple splashy moves, but nothing too crazy. But anybody who's following the Vikings in the Rick Spielman era, we don't go too crazy in free agency. It's usually the draft where we seem to make our moves. So, but with that said, we did sign a couple guys that I think should be impact players, and no surprise that it was all defense that we were looking at. Since Mike Zimmer came here, we've been a defensive first team, and coming off a year where our defense was by far the worst it's ever been under Zimmer, we really honed in on filling some key holes, and then we've got some guys coming back that not really a free agency pickup, but when you got a guy who didn't play the entire year last year like Danielle Hunter coming back, that you kind of think of that as an addition, even though it's a guy you've had on the team before. So
that's a huge addition, though. I mean, your pass rush last year without him struggled. I mean, you lost Everson Griffin, and then Hunter missed the entire season.
Well, yeah.
Like him back.
No Vikings fan wanted to admit that 2020 was going to be a rebuild year, especially coming off of 10-6 wild card, beating the Saints, in New Orleans in the first round of the playoffs. There's a lot of high expectations, but let's be honest, with COVID, with guys deciding they're going to take the year off, our biggest free agency signing, Michael Pierce, interior defensive lineman, can't blame him. He's got different health concerns, and so he sat out the year. So that was a bit. We knew that was going to be a hole, especially with Linval Joseph leaving, and then he sat out. So defensive line struggled, and then you throw on top, like you mentioned, Everson Griffin left. I know he had a small stint there in Dallas, but it didn't necessarily work out. And then Danielle Hunter being out. So that was tough, but big focus for Zimmer going into this offseason was we've got to get the defensive line squared away. Now, a lot of Vikings fans are going to say you need to quit ignoring the offensive line, but, watching that Vikings pass rush last year and not being able to stop the run, those are things we weren't used to with Zimmer. So Pierce coming back and actually playing this year, Danielle Hunter coming back, and then getting Dalvin Tomlinson in free agency is going to really shore up the inside, the interior defensive line. Then we go to corners. We let Xavier Rhodes leave the year before. We let Trey Waynes leave the year before. We let Mackenzie Alexander walk the year before. So that's where I say it was kind of a rebuild year because defensively we really were trying to get younger and rebuild. So brought in a lot of corners in the draft last year. Fortunately, one of those is having some legal troubles right now and Jeff Gladney. So we're going to have to see what happens there. But we did bring in splashy move, Patrick Peterson. I know he's on the wrong side.
That was a big splash.
Yeah, but you got to think with how young our secondary was, I feel like bringing in a guy like Peterson is going to be huge. He may not be the same corner he was a few years ago, but the leadership and the experience he can bring in when we've got young guys like Cam Dantzler, I think that's going to be big. And then also brought Mackenzie Alexander back to play that nickel corner. So I was glad we brought him back. So
what's going on with safety? So you lost Anthony.
Yeah.
Burns.
So
do you have somebody in house already?
No, we brought in your guys. So Xavier Woods, free agent. He's now we don't really have much as far as what's on the current roster. So I could see this draft being where we address safety and try to bring in some Harrison Smith's replacement or somebody opposite of Harrison Smith next year. So But right now, yeah, I think it's going to be Smith and Xavier Woods. So you could probably talk more about him. But I know for Vikings fans, I don't know a lot about him, but we do think that him playing next to Harrison Smith, he can, maybe be able to show what he can do and be somebody who can complement him. So, letting Anthony Harris walk was something we all saw coming. Thought it was going to happen the year prior, but threw the franchise tag on him. But we knew he was going to be, he was an undrafted free agent, and so he definitely outplayed his contract and earned what he earned. But we knew we wouldn't be able to afford him. And then honestly, he had a little bit of a step back year last year when he was playing on that franchise tag. So we'll see. But safety is definitely something where there's some question marks, especially with the future and what it's going to look like when Harrison Smith leaves. But corners still, we got to see how these young guys, and I mentioned Jeff Gladney, don't know what's going to happen with him. But I'd say there's still some question marks. Bringing in Patrick Peterson helped shore it up, but definitely some question marks. Linebackers feel pretty good about. Anthony Barr missed almost all of last year. Eric Kendricks got hurt towards the latter part of the year, and really I feel like that was one of the nails in the coffin for the Vikings season once he went out. So getting those guys back, we did let Eric Wilson leave in free agency, so I think he actually followed Anthony Harris and went to the Eagles. Signed a free agent, Nick Vigil, who I believe played with the Chargers. Not going to be a starter, but the Vikings play a lot of nickel anyways, and we usually have 5 DBs out there, so the third linebacker is not as huge for us, but we did bring somebody in. So we'll see. It's the offensive side. We didn't do too much. We let Kyle Rudolph walk. He was going to be a cap casualty, and we let Riley Reif, left tackle, who was our best offensive lineman last year, walk. So the draft's going to be interesting to see what we can do to plug some holes. But we do have the weapons. So, look, Kirk Cousins came off one of his best years. Vikings scored the third most points they've scored in their history. So
go ahead and shout out your first round pick. I know you had 2 last year, but go ahead and shout out that rookie, the wide receiver last year, 1,400 yards.
Oh, yeah. Look.
Saying Chase is the better of the two. I'm like, how much better could he be? The guy put up 1,400 yards as a rookie.
If he is, then whoever gets him in this year's draft, you're going to be lucky, because Justin Jefferson, Vikings haven't had the best luck with first-round picks since they picked a certain number 84 a couple decades ago. But so when we draft a first-round pick, I get a little bit of PTSD with thoughts of Troy Williamson or Laquan Treadwell, even Cordell Patterson. He was great special teams, but as a receiver, he was never going to be that guy. So
Percy Harvin, was he a first-round pick or was he second?
Percy Harvin was. So he was rookie of the year. He was a little bit of a special teams guy too, but I'll say he had a great year with Favre his rookie year, and he can make some plays. But to have Jefferson come in and break Randy Moss records, like, that's just not something I expected. I don't know that any Vikings fan could look you in the face and truthfully tell you that that's what they thought we'd get with Justin Jefferson, especially with him being the replacement for Stephon Diggs. I mean, we used that pick we got from Buffalo to bring him in. So for him to come in, and hey, shout out to Diggs, because he went out and he did his thing in Buffalo too. And he knew we were a run-first team, but excited. We got weapons, even at tight end with letting Rudolph go. We got a couple younger guys that I think are going to be able to make plays. Even Tyler Conklin, who, was a guy that we thought more of a blocking guy, and he came in and made some plays. So, we'll see. But it's definitely, and I didn't mention Dalvin Cook, but Dalvin Cook is a stud. So
I've heard of him before. He's pretty good.
Yeah, you've probably heard of him.
One thing I like about Patrick Peterson in that signing is, especially when you pair him up going against a young guy like Justin Jefferson, he's going to be able to give him so many of the tricks of the trade. Here's a way that you can, get your hand on my thigh pad and push off without the refs calling it. Here's a couple things when a defensive back does that, it's a tell. And obviously he's in the NFL. He has great coaching, but there's nothing better than having a veteran leader going against you, showing you his work ethic, showing you that competitive nature, and hyping you up and getting you ready for the game. So that's going to be immeasurable in what he's able to do, especially when you look at the defensive backs you had last year. He's going against a lot of rookies and other young guys. So having somebody like that opposite of him on a daily basis at practice is just going to make him even better, which is scary because he had 1,400 yards as a rookie. So,
well, it's also scary. He didn't really even start. We didn't even start him until the third week. So he had limited snaps the first couple of weeks, playing as like a third, fourth receiver. So,
by the way, we're in a 17-game season too.
Yes,
so
that is true too.
Add one more game of productivity and see what he's able to do.
Which also means records will eventually be out the window for everybody because you get that extra game. But I think I covered everything from
14. We've been from 10 to 14, and then 14 to 16. It's just inevitable.
Yeah,
we're a football-loving nation. Michael Irvin said it best: baseball is America's pastime. We use it to pass the time until football season starts. Americans just can't get enough of it. I mean, we love it. So any more football, I'm all for. Last year, expanding the playoffs from 6 to 7 seeds was great. Guaranteeing that only the number 1 seed gets a first round bye and making that even more special, and making number 2 and number 1 fight the entire season. I loved it. So I'm all for it. What's your thoughts before we jump in? 17-game season. Excited? Worried about it? Neutral? Where are you at with that?
No, I like you said, change is inevitable. I'm somebody who doesn't always like change, so it'll take some getting used to. But like you said, it's extra football. Preseason doesn't do anything for anybody. So, reducing preseason games and adding regular season games, I'll take that any day of the week. And, hey, for teams like you and I who came down to the last couple of weeks of were we going to make the playoffs or not, sometimes that extra game and that extra spot, like you mentioned, that's the difference of getting in or not getting in. So not that I want to admit that we need an extra game or an extra spot to get in, but hey, like everybody says, you just get into the dance and you see what happens. So
just give me a ticket, punch me a ticket, let my team take over. I mean, we see it in the March Madness. Ohio State, number 2 seed, first round, they're out. So sometimes you just need a chance. And we've seen 6 seeds. Obviously, historically in the NFL, your number 1 and number 2 seeds are the teams that are matching up against each other in the Super Bowl. But we see 4 seeds. We see 6 seeds sometimes. And eventually we'll see a 7 seed. So what we're going to do, we're going to transition. First off, I appreciate the insight. It's great to hear from a fellow fan and get a pulse of what other fandoms are looking at heading into the draft. So with the draft, we set a few rules up front. We're both going to draft. So we're going to do Cowboys and Vikings picks. We're going to do 5 rounds. Sorry, there we go. 5 rounds. We're going to do no trades. So we're just going to see what the board gives us. Do you have a position in mind that you want to walk away with? Maybe not in the first round. You're just going to take best player available most likely. But what do you want to walk away from? Is there a day 1 starter at one position specifically that you're targeting?
I kind of alluded to it, but, through all the free agency moves I mentioned, you'll notice one that was missing was offensive line. And a lot of Vikings fans feel that Rick Spielman, I could argue that this isn't necessarily the case, but has not always put as much investment into the offensive line as he should. So, last couple of years, we have gone offensive line in the early rounds, bringing in Bradbury and Ezra Cleveland last year. I would love to come out of this draft with at least one offensive line who is going to be a starting quality offensive line in the 2021 season. You look at our line right now, there's question marks at both guards and left tackle. That's 3 out of 5. So if we don't come out of this draft with at least one, and if that one is somebody who gives us options, then I feel like we've got options currently on the roster where we can put together a serviceable offensive line, but we've got to put the investment into the offensive line. So in a year or 2 from now, we're not talking about a serviceable offensive line. We're talking about, this is an offensive line that we're going to – we ran the ball pretty well last year, and we've got Dalvin Cook, but we've got to be able to pass protect. We got a 31, 32-year-old quarterback now who we've obviously invested a lot of money into. So you got to put the investments around him. So
if I'm hearing you correctly, an offensive lineman with position flex is somebody that might be a big interest. So maybe somebody like Rashawn Slater, if he falls to you.
Yeah,
we'll see what he gives us, but that's a name that might be interesting.
Yeah, because Ezra Cleveland is a guy we drafted last year who played left tackle. The thought was he would maybe eventually be our left tackle. Last year, we thought Riley Reif would be a cap casualty and Cleveland may slide in as a year 1 starter. Reif restructured his contract, stayed on a year, played Cleveland a little bit at guard, but wasn't his natural position and, didn't grade out very well. But, we bring in a guy with some flex. Maybe we're able to move Cleveland back to his natural position of left tackle and plug in the rookie at one of those guard spots. Or, maybe they think Cleveland can play one of the guard spots and we plug the rookie into the tackle. So I'd love some flexibility. Also, I know you only asked for one position, but would love another.
No, give me two. Let's hear it.
Yeah, would love another pass rusher on the other side of Danielle Hunter. Griffin was that guy for several years. He's gone. We thought maybe Fadi Odenigbo was going to be that guy, but he went to another team in free agency. We brought back Stephen Weatherly, who had rotated on the defensive end for the Vikings a couple years ago. We let him walk to the Panthers last year, and just like Mackenzie Alexander, they left for 1 year and they're coming back. But I would love a guy who could be, I think of like a Danielle Hunter, who was, I believe, a third-round pick when we got him. So, you can find a guy like that in the later rounds who can come in and start wreaking havoc. That would be great too. But we'll see how the cards are played.
We'll see how it falls. So quickly for the Cowboys, we signed 2 free safeties and 1 safety linebacker tweener. DeMonte Casey is going to most likely be our day 1 starter at free safety. He's a Dan Quinn guy. We signed Jaron Kearse, former Viking. He has that George Edwards connection. And then we signed Keanu Neal. He's going to play weak linebacker spot. And he can also play some safety too. But safety is still a position that's sorely needed because all 3 of those guys were 1-year deals. Cornerback is definitely a position of need for us. Defensive tackle is specifically a big one. We need a 1 technique who can hog up some of the blockers and free up the linebackers because that was our single biggest issue is stopping the run last year. Our needs are predominantly on the defense. However, like we saw last year, CeeDee Lamb fell in our lap. We weren't expecting it. We were targeting Kayvon Chazon, who went to the Jaguars 1 pick after us, and CeeDee Lamb fell in our lap. So we'll see how the board falls. We also need offensive line help. Last year, Tyron Smith played 3 games, and Collins played 0 games. He had hip surgery. So offensive tackle is still a position of need for us. So yeah, we're going to go best player available, and we're just going to have some fun with it. So we know that it's a PFF mock board, guys. We get it. It's not going to be realistic. We're just going to do what they give us and go off of that. So without any further ado, we'll pick this up and get started on our mock draft. I'm going to go ahead and put it full screen for you.
It's funny, though, people say it's not realistic, and then the actual draft happens, and you start seeing some things you would have never thought were realistic. Right. Like the Eagles passing up on Justin Jefferson 1 spot before us.
Yeah, and their wide receiver was not a big fan favorite. He may turn out to be a good guy down the road and develop, but right now it's definitely a questionable decision. And I know that the Eagles fans wanted CeeDee Lamb, so the fact that we were able to scoop him up in front of them just made it even a little bit more sweet. So we are going to do fast just for sake of time. And we're going to do 5 rounds tonight. We may do another draft next week and maybe do some trades and go a little bit further into it. But let's go ahead and get this draft started and see how the board falls for us. So the Cowboys are picking first. We have the 10th pick. Vikings are picking 14th. So Ryan will be up second. Let's go ahead and get this kicked off and see what we get.
Well, I heard some similar needs from the Cowboys, so you may be scooping up some names we need.
So this is just like last year. The best player available is the wide receiver. Cowboys fans, based on a lot of mocks I've seen, would jump all over Devontae Smith. We simply don't need it. So this is a spot that realistically we would probably look to trade down. I'm sure there's a team that would want to move up a few spots for him. Rashawn Slater gives us position flex. The name right here that jumps out right away is Patrick Surtain. He is a cornerback from Alabama. We drafted your boy Stephon Diggs' brother Trevon last year, and he had a really good year for us. He's in a little bit of legal trouble. We're hoping it's just a minor thing that kind of gets brushed under. Definitely need cornerback help. And Surtain is a guy with his size of 6'2", big build, could potentially be a safety as well. So he kind of fills both needs for us. Position flex. I know fans kind of cringe when I say that, but that's our pick, and I'm locking it in. So we're going to go to 14 and see what's available for the Vikings. You go ahead and let me know if there's any specific position group you want to see. If you want me to scroll slower, scroll faster.
Well, I'm seeing some names I expect to be there when we pick. Maybe not some of the top fan favorites that looks like they're already off the board. But that's how these things shake out. But we kind of alluded to it. There's a name I see there right now that will give us that position flex that I've mentioned on the offensive line. That's Elijah Vera Tucker. That's somebody who I think a lot of Vikings fans are kind of circling as might be available at our pick. This is one of those situations where I could see the Vikings dropping back a little bit if they thought they could get him a few picks later, but we're not doing trades.
Especially when you have Mac Jones right here on the board. There's a team that will move up. Chicago, obviously, you're probably not going to trade interdivision, but would New England want to move up one spot just to make sure a team doesn't jump them?
Yeah.
Maybe get a third-round pick just to move back one spot?
Christian Darrisaw is another name that is intriguing in this pick, but I'm going to stick with my one in that position flex because I just don't know how the offensive line is going to shake out. And I think we got to bring in guys who can give us that flexibility, give us some options. So AVT would be my pick here.
Let's lock it in. The 14th pick of the 2021 draft, Elijah Vera Tucker from USC. So you guys don't pick for a while, so sit back, enjoy it. You guys pick 78. We have 44 and 75, so we're going to go twice before
you got a couple picks here, yep.
Yeah, so we went cornerback last pick. Greg Newsome's a guy that I would not expect to be there. I'm pretty sure he's going to go round one. As I mentioned, offensive tackle is definitely a position of need for us. Jamin Davis right here is a guy that I could see Cowboys jumping all over. We need defensive help all over the board. Linebacker would be a big position. So LVE, we did not pick up his fifth-year option yet. And then Jalen Smith is a guy that kind of underperformed since signing a big contract. So I could see that. Based on what I'm seeing on the board, I like Jamar Johnson. I like Richie Grant. A lot of Cowboys fans have one of those two names circled. We already addressed that. We need offensive tackle help, but I feel like the Cowboys are going to jump on one of the safeties, and I think Richie Grant is the guy for them here. So we're going to take the 4-year starter out of UCF, pick 44. I'm not quite as high on him as most of our fans, but I think he's a guy that the Cowboys would go for. So pick 75, Jamie Davis is still on the board. There's a whole run right here of safeties if that's a position you guys are interested in. You got Jamar and Ardarius Washington right there. Tay Gowan, Kendrick Green, so if you need some interior line help. So right here, what I think the Cowboys are going to do is look for our big defensive tackle, and Milton Williams is on the board. He's a big boy. He's about 320, 330, and he fills that interior need to help us stop the run. So that is our pick 75, locking that one in. So 3 picks later, Vikings are on the board. What do you want to look at?
Well, already some names up here. I mentioned linebackers earlier, but Anthony Barr is a guy who only has 1 year left on his contract, so we're most likely looking for linebacker replacement down the road. And when you're drafting, you're not always just thinking about 2021. Of course, you gotta be planning for the future. But Jamar Johnson's another guy. We talked extensively about safety, and I feel like there's some question marks still on the safety spot. And that's a guy when I'm thinking about Harrison Smith being gone in a couple of years that could be somebody who comes in and fills that void in a couple of years. Scroll down just a little bit, just curious. Yeah, see, I mentioned wanting to get somebody on the, being able to take away some of the pressure from Danielle Hunter on the other side. From the looks of it, though, we've got a couple picks coming up not too far after this one, so I think we'll probably be able to get some kind of edge rusher later on. So with this pick, I would go Jamar Johnson, safety out of Indiana.
Interesting guy. He had 4 interceptions last year, 2 pick sixes, forced a fumble. He's a guy that fans will get excited over. His tackling's a little bit shaky, but what he does in coverage, he's as close to Anthony Harris as you can get in this draft. I'll put it that way from a coverage perspective. Standpoint. So we're going to lock that in.
Everybody likes a ball hog guy. I know that's flash. Yeah. So,
So you're picking again, pick 90. A couple of names are still on the board that you just looked at. I'm going to guess Ardarius Washington's probably not in consideration since you just went safety. And you still
I wouldn't go safety again. I still think line is something we got to continue to be looking at.
So Brady Christensen.
Brady Christensen's a name that I've seen, and I think he's more of a true tackle, but I've mentioned if we've got that flexibility, then, we may be able to move some things around.
Are there any position groups you want to look at?
Go down just a little bit. And I'm sorry, there was a. Oh, okay, I got it. Wide receiver, just look. This is my mock draft, and I like wide receivers. So that's always a position I feel like in some of these rounds. You know, we got a guy like Stephon Diggs in the 5th round, and I think if there's guys you think can come in and be a playmaker in a few years. Not seeing any though that I would necessarily take with this pick.
Do you need linebacker help? Does Jamie Davis do it for you?
Davis
coming from pretty much exclusively a zone coverage scheme, which scares off some people. But last year, no team in the NFL ran man more than 50%. So every single team in the league ran zone more than man. So from that standpoint, it doesn't really scare me. He's a guy in real life I think is going to go sometime in the 1st round, probably late 1st round. I could see like Green Bay snagging him, for instance, as a team that kind of jumps out for me there. Maybe the Buffalo Bills. But he's still available. He's best player by pretty large margin right now.
Best player available, and just knowing linebacker is not a need right now, but this is a guy that I'm sure Zimmer would love to get in and have as somebody who's going to be a starter down the road and, potentially replace Anthony Barr. I'd probably go Davis in this pick.
Locking it in. Jamin Davis.
Lock it in.
90. So how are you feeling on the draft so far? You made a few picks. Excited?
I feel like if this was
real, been able to address pass rusher, but you've gotten pretty much.
Yeah, I don't have the edge rusher, and I still feel like we could bring in some linemen, but we've got a number of picks. We've got 10 total picks in this draft, so I think we're not done when it comes to potential offensive linemen.
Okay, so what I'm seeing right now, offensive tackle. We haven't addressed it yet. Brady Christensen's available. It's a position in need. In my board, he would be the best player available of what's available. A lot of Cowboys fans are high on Kelvin Joseph. He has a lot of off the field issues. I'm good there from a talent standpoint. I like him, but the guy allegedly smacked or punched a coach. There's a lot of rumors that the Kentucky coaching staff asked him to opt out because they didn't think he was really invested in the season. So when you start hearing stuff like that, I'm good. He can play elsewhere, and if he turns out, I wish the best for him, but it's not going to be here in Dallas. So we're going to go Brady Christensen here.
Yeah, you don't want a Latrell Sprewell, who choked his coach, I believe, years ago.
Yeah, so he's still here, right? We're
still there, yeah.
So he's still sitting there waving at me saying, hey, it's a character risk, but we're in round 4. So looking at what's on the board, a name that jumps out at me right away. He's not a sexy name for fans. A lot of people don't really know a lot about him. But if you watch any of Antoine Winfield Jr.'s tape last year, Benjamin St. Juste is an interesting guy. He's 6'3". The reason that's relevant for the Cowboys is we hired Dan Quinn as a defensive coordinator who's coming from that Seattle mindset where they like big defensive backs, and we don't have that guy in the roster. We did take Surtain in the 1st round at 6'2", but everybody else on our roster is 6'1" or smaller. So I think we're going to go for a guy that adds some size and can kind of bully wide receivers. So Benjamin St. Juste, we're going to double up at cornerback and get that position solidified and not have to worry about it down the road. That's our pick right here. And a lot of Cowboys fans are going to say, what? Throw a remote. And then they're going to watch some highlight tapes, listen to PFF, and be all on board. So that's our pick.
Don't sleep on what the Golden Gophers have been doing these last couple of years too. So
yeah. All right, here we are. Pick 119. Vikings are on the board. PFF says tackle, guard, edge, and safety are your positions of need. Heading into the draft, we've knocked out some of those. I see guard available, Kendrick Green right here.
Yeah, and I'm sure a lot of Vikings fans would say, hey, we got to go offensive line. But, at this point, I'd be looking at an edge rusher. There's a name. I don't know if he's still on the board at this point, but edge rusher out of Tulane, Cameron Sample would be a name.
Gone, yeah.
Is he gone?
Unfortunately, he didn't go too far before your pick, but he is off the board now.
He's off the board.
Quincy Roche right here, pick 110. That's a name that I think if he's sitting there and the Vikings are 9 picks back, they probably would make a move for somebody like him. Cam Sample went first pick of the 4th round.
Yes, early.
Jonathan Cooper, he's an edge rusher. He's an interesting name if you're looking for some pass rush help. They have him as 122. You're at pick 119, so it's not a reach there. He'd be an interesting guy for you. There's quite a few cornerbacks if that's a position you want to look at. Amari Rogers, if you want to go for another wide receiver, maybe an interesting guy, and a couple guards available. What are your thoughts?
I said best player available, but I do think once you start to get to these middle rounds, third, fourth round, you do start trying to address some needs, even if they're not immediate needs. Unfortunately, Kelvin Joseph and his off the field issues. Look, we already got a cornerback who's got off the field issues, and unfortunately, he was a first round pick. So I think the Vikings.
Kelvin Joseph is a guy that a lot of people have, quite a few YouTubers and people on Twitter that I respect quite a bit have Kelvin Joseph in their top 25 players in the draft. So He's one of those guys that at some point in the next, if he's not taken soon, you kind of have to search fire. But I mean, you're pick 119, so we're still in the fourth round and maybe a little bit early for that if the off the field issues really are as big as they say.
Yeah, I'm drafted in the mindset of I'm Rick Spielman, and what he would probably do, which would probably steer away. It'd be hard for me with the talent not to take him in this pick. But if we want to be realistic, then I'm probably looking. I see. The UCF corner is somebody you seem intrigued by.
I am. I watched all their defense. They had 3 guys that are all going to get drafted. We took Richie Grant here in this mock draft. Aaron Robinson's probably off the board already. Tig Allen was an opt-out, but he had good film the year before, so he'd be an interesting guy.
I think I go need here. And I'd take the top guard who's left, Kendrick Green, out of Illinois.
Kendrick Green. And they have him on their board as 68. So if you're getting him here at 119, you got to feel like that's a really good pickup for the Vikings. So we'll lock that one in for you.
We got 2 question marks at guard. So, if we can bring in a guy and he'd be an eventual starter, then I think we got to go guard in that pick.
So here we are. Kelvin Joseph, the guy we just chatted about, Link, went 1 pick before you to Washington. So he's their problem. I wanted him to pan out before, and now I'm all against this guy. So what do you see? Where do you want to go from here? There's another tackle available if you want to double dip at tackle. You'll get 2 tackles and a guard in this draft. Edge is still a position you need we haven't been able to address yet. What do you want to look at?
Yeah, I think at this point we got to go edge rusher. We got to bring in somebody on the other side, and
let me show you what's available. We'll skip to that position. And this is one thing Ryan and I talked about offline. I want to chat with people that are watching this. It's easy to go into a draft saying we're going to go this position in round 1, this position in round 2, this position in round 3, but it just doesn't work like that. It really doesn't. You can see the board some of the times. There's just not a player worth where your draft slot is. So you have to be fluid. That's the word that I would use for the draft more than anything. And especially this year, we had a lot of opt-outs. We did not have a combine. We had a lot of teams with shortened seasons. A lot of COVID issues where players missed multiple games. We did not have a combine to measure player versus player. We're going off pro days, which are always a little bit, we'll call them generous to the players. So if you're going to draft a player this year, your scouts have to really do the due diligence. It's a tough year.
I don't envy them having to do this in real life. It's
that's what we're looking at edge rusher. Does anybody jump out there?
Yeah, I mean, Jonathan Cooper's a name I've seen, and I don't think he had gaudy sack numbers last year, but you look at somebody like Daniil Hunter. When we drafted him, he wasn't somebody who came out of college from LSU with gaudy numbers, but kind of had that motor and the drive that Mike Zimmer and Andre Patterson on the defensive line are looking for. So in this pick, I think Jonathan Cooper would be somebody we'd be interested in most likely taking. So I'm going to go Cooper.
I pulled this up for a reason. A lot of people are going to be down on him because they're going to say he had 3 sacks last year. PFF graded him as an 88 overall, which means he's a high-level player. He was the 12th highest defensive end. Don't worry about this as much. Look at the hits and hurries, and he played 8 games.
Yeah.
That's phenomenal production in that span. If you look at it over the course of a full season, he's probably looking at 5 or 6 sacks, but he's probably at 12 hits and probably well in the 30s in terms of hurries. That's a pretty good season for anybody. So, yeah, Jonathan Cooper, I think, will be a great pick here. So, is that where
everybody wants to look at sheer numbers? But yeah, to your point, 2020, you got to throw some of that out the window because a team like the Ohio State in the Big Ten, they got a really late start. A lot of these guys didn't play as many games. We didn't even mention the fact that a lot of guys opted out as well. So I think, especially you're in the fourth round, you got to draft guys on some potential too. So I'd go Cooper with this pick.
All right, pick 125, Jonathan Cooper from The Ohio State University. So we're still in round 4, pick 134. You've successfully nailed all 4 of your needs so far. So now it's free game. You can go wherever you want. Do you want to double?
This is a good thing for the Vikings and being a fan and looking to next week, because Rick Spielman loves to stockpile his picks, and here's where it comes in handy, because I know in this scenario we're not trading, but when we get to next week, you've got the picks if you want to sit in them and address need, but you also got that trade ammo if I wanted to move up earlier, and get one of those guys who was taken off the board right before our pick, I could have done it. So
right here, we're pick 29 of the 4th round. It's 134. You still have pick 143 and 157, and you've already picked in this round. You have 3 4th-round picks. If you want to package that to move back into third, add that to thirds to move into the second, you have that flexibility.
And we talked about realistic. I'm sure there'll be some moving by the Vikings and Rick Spielman, but hey, it's still fun to play the what would happen if we actually just sat tight and used all these picks. Honestly, with this pick, I want to see cornerbacks who in the secondary is still available. Wide receiver would be a position as well.
So Trey Brown's an interesting guy. He is that cornerback / return man. He's a stellar return guy. So he might be an interesting guy. A lot of Cowboys fans are high on Ambry Thomas. Marco Wilson is the guy that, if you're looking at the 4, jumps out in terms of size and measurables. He had a huge pro day, great size, bad film. So he's the guy that, do you take the player or take the promise? He'd be an interesting player at this point. Rashad Wildcase, I really don't know too much about, to be honest.
That name, though, it'd be hard not to draft him.
Yeah, it's a great name. There's been some good names in this draft. Kerry Vincent Jr. is a really intriguing player right now. So he was an opt-out. Had he played, he's probably a 2nd-round pick, if not a late first.
And I just mentioned that. Yeah. You got to keep in consideration now. This is where us having so many picks. It's do you take a flyer on one of those guys, or do you take best player available and hope you can get them in a few picks? I'll throw one thing out here too. Is I mentioned Kirk Cousins is, he's 32, I believe now, maybe going on 33. I'd be interested in quarterbacks, through these rounds. I always like to bring in a guy who might be I don't want to say a project, but our backup is not anybody who's going to be, our quarterback of the future. So I'd love to just see what was available. I like Notre Dame, but I don't think I'd go Ian.
Especially at 134, and any of these quarterbacks, PFF thinks would be a huge reach here.
Yeah,
so probably not going there this pick.
I'd probably go corner with this pick, and seeing what was available.
Do you like the guy with some return skills? Do you need that? Do you like? Do you want to go with a guy like Ambry, or maybe go with the promise of what Marco Wilson could develop?
I could see Zimmer here wanting,
or Kerry Vincent Jr.
I could see Zimmer here wanting somebody with some upside and maybe needs some coaching and some development. So hey, for sake of bringing in somebody who may not be best player available but has some upside, I'd go Marco Wilson. You sold me on him.
All right. We're going to snag him right here, pick 134.
The returnability is intriguing, though, because that is something I feel like we've kind of been lacking ever since Marcus Sherrill's left and, Cordero Patterson with kick returns. But I don't see – Zimmer loves his corners, and I think if he gets a corner, he wants a corner who's going to be able to cover, not necessarily return punts.
Right. So looking at the board, there's 2 names that jump out for me for the Cowboys right here at 138. If you're going off PFF's needs, tight end's the only position we haven't addressed. I don't know the tight end's really truly in need because we have Blake Jarwin returning. Dalton Schultz stepped up last year when Jarwin was out. We signed Jeremy Sprinkle. It's not really a sexy group, but it's a pretty solid group where I don't feel like it's a huge need. Although somebody like Kyle Pitts fell in round one, you probably reevaluate that just because he's like a weapon of mass destruction, not really a tight end. But looking at the board, Bobby Brown the third is an interesting guy from A&M. We already went defensive tackle earlier, but we still need defensive tackle help. The other guy I'd consider right here would be Robert Hainsey. We already signed an drafted offensive lineman too, but as I mentioned, both of our starting tackles were hurt last year. Our third string tackle was hurt last year and has since signed with the Carolina Panthers. Our fourth string tackle played and also got hurt, but he came back later in the season. So tackle is a big area of need for us. Robert Hainsey right here, it seems a little bit too hard to pass up value-wise. I'm going to go ahead and jump on him and feel pretty confident about my offensive line moving forward and invest our mega million quarterback that we signed. So let's go ahead and draft Robert Hainsey for Dak Prescott.
You got to protect the investment. And I think we're all used to the Cowboys having that stalwart offensive line that they had a few years ago. So it'd be nice if you can get back to that.
Yep. So here we are, pick 143, second to last pick. It's a comp pick for the Vikings before we wrap up the fourth round, heading into our fifth and final round of the draft. What do you want to go with?
All right. So here I'd be interested in wide receivers again. I haven't been able to pick one yet. We seem to always pick a wide receiver at some point in these mid rounds.
Could you use some size? Simi Fehoko out of Stanford. So what's interesting about him, production was pretty decent considering he played in a short season. Only 6 games, 574 yards, 3 touchdowns. That's great productivity for anybody. The issue with him is he's not really quick. He is fast. He ran a 4.3, I think it was a 4.3840, but he's kind of like a one-gear guy. He only knows one speed, but he offers size. I don't know if that's something that intrigues you at all. We'll pull up the wide receivers and see what's
it's intriguing. Thielen and Jefferson aren't overly tall, big guys. Great route runners, though.
Amari Rodgers is kind of a big name right here. I think fans will kind of gravitate towards him with that Clemson connection. There's actually 2 Clemson players right here, too. Anybody jumping out at you that you want to look at? So looking at Cornell Powell here, 6 foot, 210. So he's pretty similar in size to what you have. Played all 12 games, 882 yards. The year before, played 13. Obviously wasn't a starter, didn't have a lot. But last year, 882 and 7. Pretty solid.
7 touchdowns. Of course, we all know who was throwing to him.
Right. This guy right here, 5'10", not a big guy, but he adds the speed element, 1,000 yards, 7 touchdowns. A little bit more exciting for fans, I think, if you're looking at him. But, again, he's a smaller wide receiver. We'll take a look and see if there's anybody else that jumps out at you. Shi Smith right here is an interesting guy from South Carolina. Tamorian Terry is that speed threat. So if you want a guy who can take the top off the defense, that's him. They have him at 193, so it'd be a reach right here. But he'd be an interesting guy if you wanted to look at wide receiver. What are you thinking? Is there anybody that jumps out at you, or do you want to look at a different group?
I like size here. Amari Rodgers' numbers were definitely intriguing, but looking at his size, I'm thinking he's more of a slot guy.
Right.
And we re-signed Chad Beebe, and not that he's anybody that Vikings fans are going to be overly thrilled about. I'd like to bring in a just bigger threat here, so I would. I'd probably go Fehoko just based on size and.
Got to say the whole name; it just flows off the tongue.
Yeah, it is.
Simi Fehoko. It's a great name.
Simi Fehoko just feels right here, so I'll go.
All right.
I'll go there.
143, wide receiver Simi Fehoko from Stanford. We're on the 5th round, final round of what we're going to do tonight. Kind of got a late start. Both of us have kids and full-time jobs. We just do this for fun. So we're gonna wrap it up with this round. So you're picking 157 and 168. Your last 2 picks. Where do you want to go?
Wild Goose is still there with that name, but
great name too. 5'11", 197. No interceptions last year, but he only played 2 games. So we'll just
he's a Badger.
Yeah.
He's a Wisconsin Badger, so Vikings fans would probably say, no, you need to stay away. So I feel like I've hit a lot of needs.
Do you double up at pass rusher here? Shaka Tony, another great name. 9 games, 5 sacks, 4 hits, 14 hurries, 6'3", 252. So he's your traditional 4-3 defensive end size wise.
Now I believe I may have ignored edge rusher. I can't remember if I grabbed one yet.
You took Jonathan Cooper, yeah. So
That's right. I did take
Cooper. You've actually gotten all 4 of your needs from PFF right now in what you said pre-draft. So you're playing with house money here.
Yeah, and I think I've already taken 2 linemen, but I mentioned this is an area where I feel like a lot of Vikings fans feel like we've neglected and need some depth. So Aaron Banks is a name there, another guard out of Notre Dame. Looks like PFF had a decent grade for him. And we are Irish fans too. So for sake of bringing in a Golden Domer to replace Kyle Rudolph, who left the Vikings, I'll go Aaron Banks and bring in another guard.
You guys have a history of going with Notre Dame players too, so it makes sense. We're going to go ahead and lock that one in for you. And you're picking again. You picked actually before we do again, so go ahead. You're on the board, 168. Last pick of the draft tonight.
Does anyone think Vikings will really be making this many picks in these 5? Man, maybe we will, but
no, I doubt. The Cowboys have 10 picks. So I'm telling Cowboys fans, there's no way in the world we take 10 players. There's just not. Probably going to walk away with 7 or 8. Trade in some of those mid-round picks. We have 2/3, 2/4. Package them and move up. Walk away with more top 100 players. Where do you want to go here?
I've joked about it, but I know Zimmer loves his corners, and Wild Goose has just been on this board too long. I'll need to do a little more research on him to see if he's really somebody I'd want us to go in reality. But looking at where they've got him now, his overall grade doesn't seem great. No interceptions.
They have him as a 3rd-round pick.
Yeah,
so
I don't know. Doesn't really have size, but you know what? I got to figure Zimmer's got all these corners probably memorized. So let's just throw Wild Goose. If anything, it's a cool jersey to buy because walking around with a Wild Goose Vikings jersey. So let's do it just to wrap up our 5-round Vikings mock.
Plus, it gives you that easy shoe-in fantasy football name of Duck Duck Wild Goose.
Oh yeah,
that's
perfect. Hey, the Vikings, and they did that the Duck Duck Goose. Although if you live in Minnesota, they call it Duck Duck Gray Duck. But the 2017 season, they did that as a celebration. They got some rave reviews. So let's get them in there.
Okay. So I'm looking at the board. I don't see anything that really jumps out at me right here for the Cowboys. We've been able to address all of our areas of needs according to what PFF thinks we need, except for tight end. There's just nobody available. Noah Gray right here is a guy that could go. I really don't think it's a big need for us. So at this position, I mentioned earlier, linebacker is an area of need for us. It's the only position we have not went on the defensive side so far. So Justin Hilliard, he's 113 on the ranking. We're 179. It's a comp pick, 5th round. YOLO. Let's lock this in. It's our last pick. Let's wrap up this draft and take a look at both of our teams and see what we walk away with. See if we'd be happy.
Shaka Tony was still there too, which is, we mentioned, that's another good name.
He was. So here's what we got. Disregard PFF's draft grade because they're doing it based on where the player's taken, not if the player makes sense for you. So if they have Patrick Surtain as 14, you take him at 10, you're going to get a negative grade. If they have Elijah Vera Tucker at say like 11 and you take them at 14, you're going to get a positive grade. We also do it based on need and how they assess it. They don't think cornerbacks as big of a need as I do. So I'm okay with the B- there. I'm pretty happy with this pick. You guys got Vera Tucker. It gives you that position. But they gave it an A-. I mean, you can't be mad at that. Your 2nd pick, A-. So with what you have so far, we'll go through the Vikings picks, then we'll go through the Cowboys. So you get Vera Tucker round 1. Round 3, Jamar Johnson. So you nailed the safety spot. You got Anthony Harris's replacement. You have a guy that can compete with Xavier Woods and eventually take over for Harrison Smith. You get Jamin Davis, a guy who can literally contribute day one as a starter for you if needed. I know they gave him a C+.
I'm going with the C+ because that's
Look
a
at pick
pick.
90. Remember next Thursday when the draft starts, dude's going to go round 1. So
Yeah.
if he falls to 90, then you jump all over that. Then you have Kendrick Green, your guard, Jonathan Cooper, your edge rusher, Marco Wilson, your potential A minus again, Simi Fehoko, your size wide receiver C plus, and Aaron Banks A minus. If you're looking at the Vikings and Rashad Wildgoose, you look at the Vikings average pick. That's a lot. Sorry, disregard that. That's a lot of A minuses right there. I don't know how you got a B plus when almost every pick you had is an A minus.
Well, the 2 C pluses they gave me were guys I mentioned were not necessarily flyers, but you know, the linebacker out of Kentucky was best player available. It's not necessarily a need. I'm sure PFF is saying, wait, why did Vikings take linebacker there? You don't need linebacker, but that's a guy that was more drafted for the future. So, we'll take the B plus.
So let's go through this. Barrett Tucker, day 1 starter.
I sure hope so, but yes, I think he would be.
Jamar Johnson, day 1 starter.
Maybe not. We'll see.
Early season. At some point in the season, probably start.
Yeah, maybe a little competition early on. You got to remember Zimmer's a guy who likes guys to earn their spot. Examples: Justin Jefferson. He even had to earn his spot. Maybe not a day 1 starter, but a guy I think could be starting by middle of the season. Jamin Davis most likely not starting, but I mentioned we really only run 2 linebacker sets most of the time, so I'm okay with that.
We're gonna have to do a whole video on that, by the way, because that is one of my biggest pet peeves. I hear fans say, "Well, he's not a 3-4 guy or not a 4-3 guy." If you look historically at any season, the average team is in nickel 62% of the time. Your 3-4 and 4-3 are irrelevant. It really doesn't matter.
It is. Yeah.
Okay, so far we have Jamar Johnson probably going to start at some point. Vera Tucker, day 1 starter. Jamin Davis, maybe not a day 1 starter, but a guy who's going to contribute. We're at Kendrick Green, Cooper, Wilson. Fehoko.
Yeah. So Green's a guy again. With the holes we have on offensive line, I think our first 2 picks that went to that position in the draft are most likely going to be starting, competing for a job. So I could see Green playing one of those guard spots. Vera Tucker, like I mentioned, either guard or tackle, depending on what we do with Cleveland. And then I think Vikings fans would be feeling pretty good about the line with Bradbury at center and then Brian O'Neill at right tackle. So feel good about that. Cooper, I think, could be a guy who comes in and starts again. We need somebody on the opposite side of Danielle Hunter. Plus, Zimmer likes to rotate his defensive line, keep him fresh. So, he's a guy I think who could come in and contribute. Marco Wilson, he may not be, but let's see what happens with Gladney. Like I said, Zimmer loves his cornerback, so he's a guy I'm sure he'd want to be a project, but get some experience in 2021.
Got 3 more. Fehoko, Aaron Banks, Wild Beast. Any of those a starter, potential starter, or guy who can contribute?
Yeah, I think these are more depth picks. And 4th, 5th round, if you're drafting for depth for that season with potential for starting in the few years, I think most fans will be fine with that. So I did kind of go depth here, not necessarily needs. We'll see with Aaron Banks because we've got open spots that I mentioned. We'll see just when you get into rookie camps and training camps, it's not going to look normal. I think even though everybody's hoping we're kind of moving on the other side of COVID, things may look a little different. I've even heard of some teams already saying they're not doing any optional camps. But there'll be some competition, so we'd see how it shakes out. But I think this is more depth in these latter picks.
Okay, so if this is what happens, granted, we know that there's going to be trades. We know that stuff's going to happen. But if you have a draft like this, as a Vikings fan, are you happy?
I'd be happy. Luckily, those guys, they get paid the big bucks. So there may be some names when the draft actually happens that I'm like, oh, I didn't know who that was, or that didn't seem like a position we need. I do trust Spielman in the front office for the most part. They make some head scratchers, but I think Jamar Johnson and Elijah Vera Tucker, if those are our first 2 picks, if there were no trading. Now, you saw the picks we have in the 4th round. If there's a guy in the 2nd round that we think could be that edge rusher that we need, then I could see packaging up and moving into the 2nd round. But assuming we don't, I'd be happy with those as our first 2 picks.
Okay. So joining into the Cowboys right now, Patrick Surtain, day one starter immediately. Richie Grant is kind of funny because if I was drafting for me and not what I think the Cowboys would do, I would have taken Jamar Johnson at 44 and had no problem with it. So the
Mm-hmm.
fact that he's at 78 for you is a great fit there. I just love what he can do coverage wise. Richie Grant, what my concern is he's 23. He turns 24 in November. A lot of the other safeties in this class are 21 or 22, so he's a full 2 years older than them.
Mm-hmm.
But he comes with a ton of experience. He was a 4 year starter. Had a 6 interception season in 2018, and then kind of moved progressively closer to the box. So that's kind of my concern is he not really a true deep free safety, or did they just need him to play closer, and that's why he did it? I don't know the answer. That's kind of why I'm not quite as high on him as some of my fans. But again, Satan, day one starter, Richie Grant, probably a day one starter or an early season starter. Milt Williams is a guy that I think could come in and start within the first 5 or 6 games. So we've landed 3 players right here in the top 75 that I think could start or play a lot. Moving into the fourth round, Brady Christensen is not a guy who's going to start, or at least I hope he doesn't. He's Tyron Smith's backup. He's
Mm-hmm.
his, heir apparent. You're going to bring him in. He's your swing tackle, and if you need him, great. If you don't, he just develops under 2 good tackles. Benjamin St. Juste is a guy who offers size. So he's a matchup guy. He's the guy that you're going to bring in the red zone to match up with a wide receiver or tight end that you may have a size disadvantage with. He's not a guy who's going to start, but he's picked 115. That's a fourth round pick. Hainsey, again, he's not going to be your swing tackle. He's going to be your fourth tackle option. Maybe give him a look at guard, but he's a guy that gives you depth in a position we strongly need it. And then kind of wrapping up our draft, we took Justin Hilliard. He's a linebacker. PFF gave him an A-. He's not going to start here. If he is, then we have bigger issues than what we thought going into the draft. But he's a guy who can contribute, be a special teams player, and play in some type of sub packages. So overall, if we get a B+, I'm pretty pleased with this draft. So it is 10:51 Eastern time, and Ryan and I are both on the East Coast, and we go to work tomorrow. Went a little bit longer than what I was projecting it to. Ryan, absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for being
Appreciate you having me.
my first show. I would love to have you on. You have a great sense of football knowledge. I look at you as a mentor, peer, bounce ideas off of you. I love chatting with you during the season. So I would love to have you on in the future if you want to be on. It's been 57 minutes. I got to let you go. I know you have a family you got to get to.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Ryan's a Vikings fan. You can tell by his hat in the background. He's a Stars fan too. If you like Dallas Stars, if you like the Minnesota Vikings, you like the Cincinnati Reds, or you just like football talk in general, follow Ryan on Twitter. Where can they find you?
Yep. Twitter handles at rgun1. So that's RGUNN1. And like Matt said, my teams are kind of all over the place. So don't try to nail me down of he must be from Minnesota, because I'm not. But, yeah, many different teams. That'll have to be a whole podcast if you want me to go into
we'll do that.
To the stories of why. But hey, yeah, drop me a follow, and Matt, appreciate you having me on. A lot of fun. Hey, it's a mock draft. We do it to have fun. So I know a lot of people take it too serious, and we'll see what happens when the real draft, happens next week. But it's fun to get in and just see what could happen. So absolutely had a blast.
People might be circling back to this mock draft next week saying, I kind of wish Ryan was our GM. You never know. So
we'll see.
Again, this is episode 1 of my YouTube channel. Brand new channel just launched this weekend. Please subscribe and like if you like it. We're going to go through draft analysis. I'm going to break down players. We're going to look at film. I'm going to highlight what I like about players, what I don't like. Go over kind of the nuts and bolts. Probably have Ryan jump back on after the draft and go over that. This week, we're going to do the Eagles mock draft. We're going to do the Falcons mock draft. Maybe the Panthers. We're going to knock out quite a few this week. You can find me on Twitter. I am Professor O_NFL. Feel free to drop a like, follow me, comment if you want me to highlight a specific player. We'll do that. This is a 58-minute video. We're going to keep them more to the 10 to 15-minute range moving forward. It's a mock draft, though. There's a lot to discuss, and we did 2 teams. But once again, I really appreciate you guys joining. Follow Ryan. He's an awesome guy. High five, Ryan. Great job.
Appreciate it.
See us next time. Thank you.
And I will subscribe right after this. So
I appreciate it.
All right. Take care.